Hello, I'm Airlie Ward. Welcome to Stateline. Despite tens of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money being funnelled into fibre optic infrastructure, Tasmanians still don't have access to cheap, super-fast broadband internet. This week, the government hailed a deal to use the Basslink fibre optic cable as an important step in fixing that problem, but it's likely to be mid-next year before internet providers start using the link. For every 6-month delay, analysts estimate it costs the state $100 million in lost economic growth. And as Simon Cullen reports, there are still questions over how fair the Basslink deal really is.
Tasmania is in the slow lane on the information superhighway.
I think of all the states that we travel around, I think Tasmania is in the worst position. And when we talk about the social and economic development of the state being really dependent on good broadband services, then Tasmania is going to struggle.
There are lots of problems in Tasmania. On one side, it is the price. It's a very high price. And then on the other side is actually the quality of broadband is well below standards in Australia, and the Australian standards are already under international standards. So in that respect, Tasmania is really at the bottom of the pit.
And much of the blame has been levelled at the dominant telco, Telstra.
The retail price of Big Pond in Sorell or Brighton or Devonport or Ulverston is the same price that you pay in Sydney. Now, even though there is a high cost of doing business in Tasmania, we average our prices.
The reason for the finger pointing is because Telstra owns and operates the only 2 working fibre optic links across Bass Strait. It sells access to other internet providers. But those businesses have accused Telstra of charging too much. So much so that some competitors like Optus don't even offer consumer broadband plans in Tasmania. Even the government's joined in the criticism.
What's holding telecommunications back in Tasmania is, I believe, anti-competitive pricing from Telstra.
For the past 2.5 years, a third fibre optic cable between Tasmania and Victoria has been dormant. It was laid with the Basslink power cable. It's owned by a private company called Basslink, but the state government has been paying $2 million a year to access it without being able to use it. This week, the government, Basslink and Aurora Energy finally signed an agreement to use the cable, meaning both Basslink and Aurora will become broadband internet wholesalers.
It's always been the government's aim to introduce market competition on backhaul and wholesale pricing. And in terms of broadband, I think the consumer is going to be the benefit.
The Premier was keen to trumpet this week's announcement and was quick to guarantee it would result in cheaper broadband internet. But Basslink is more cautious. While it thinks the deal will probably result in cheaper broadband in the long term, the company has stopped short of offering a guarantee.
At the moment, we're currently working on our wholesale prices. We haven't finalised what they are, but we firmly believe that we can be as competitive as Telstra and open up the market down here. The main aim, of course, is to open the market so that there is broadband growth in Tasmania.
Do you think it will be significantly cheaper than Telstra, though?
I think we'll be on a par with Telstra.
Well, I don't think we can guarantee it, but we can certainly say that the prices will be cheaper. How much cheaper will depend on the competition. But what we've already seen is a reduction in prices in Tasmania. The incumbent has responded. We're seeing a substantial drop in the wholesale rates already, and I think that will continue.
That incumbent, Telstra, has told Stateline that it has definitely not changed the price of wholesale access across Bass Strait. It uses less than 10% of the capacity of its 2 cables between Victoria and Tasmania, leaving enough spare capacity to carry 180,000 high-definition television channels. Telstra argues the low volume is why it's more expensive to transfer data across Bass Strait than it is on international routes.
Those high volume routes allow the cost to be recovered over a huge volume of data. But when you look at Tasmania, it's very low usage across Bass Strait, and the cables only serve Tasmania. So those cables cost us over $50 million, so $27 million each, and it's a very low volume to recover that cost.
As part of this week's deal, Aurora will have access to the Basslink cable, and Basslink will get to use the government-owned fibre optic network that connects the northwest, the north and the south. But it's unclear how the financials of the deal work. In addition to the $2 million annual fee paid by the state government, Stateline understands Basslink will also collect an access fee from Aurora.
Why does Aurora have to pay a fee to access the cable when the state government's already paying that $2 million?
Well, look, I'm not going to get involved in the commercial ramifications in terms of the arrangement, but this is the best possible deal that we could get, and given that the overall aspiration was to introduce competition, and this was the only deal in town. It took a long time to get there. I think that we've got the best possible result for the community in Tasmania.
The details of the fees and the commercial arrangements are strictly confidential, but I'd have to say that the reason we've done the deal is that it's a more attractive deal for Aurora and Basslink, and I think that than it is compared to the alternative.
Even with this week's announcement, wholesale broadband competition is still some months away. Basslink says it's likely to be mid-next year until agreements with various internet providers take effect. The commercialisation of the Basslink cable is taking place in a wider national context, which could affect its usefulness. The federal government is in the process of putting together a $4.7 billion national broadband network, which it promises will reach 98% of the population with super-fast internet.
The national broadband network will also have its effect on Tasmania. We have absolutely no idea what the government is going to do. And that is a big worry for the ISPs. Are you going to invest in equipment that you can link to the Aurora Basslink, with the risk that in a year or 2 years' time, when the government makes the decision and, for example, decides that everybody gets fibre, that you end up with a hell of a lot of obsolete equipment in these exchanges in Tasmania.
On behalf of the federal government, Bill Glasson headed up a national review into regional telecommunications. He believes Tasmania has a strong case for priority funding under the Commonwealth's broadband plan.
If this country is going to grow as a nation, then Tasmania has to grow with us. And obviously, given the resources and the potential to develop new businesses in Tasmania, it should be a priority. There's no two ways about it. And so I'd like to think that when this national broadband network is rolled out, it will have make a major difference to backhaul services to Tasmania, particularly across the Bass Strait. And from that, we can actually develop a more competitive model to attract the Telstras and Optuses of the world into the system, and also the various internet service providers.
Even though there are 3 massively underutilised fibre optic cables, the Tasmanian Treasurer is already pushing for another undersea cable to Victoria.
The next part is to achieve a 4th link across Bass Strait, and we're working on that, and we've made submissions in relationship to that. We will be further work on that. We are pushing as hard as we can to ensure that we get the equivalent services in Tasmania to the rest of Australia. And, we can come from a position of being last to a position of being first, given the right arrangements across Bass Strait and with National Broadband Network.
But a new national broadband network remains some time off. And for the time being, Tasmanians still only have Telstra providing services across Bass Strait. That's estimated to be costing the state hundreds of millions of dollars each year in lost economic growth.
I've made some calculations based on national figures, that are produced here in Australia by the government and by others, as well as international figures like, from the OECD and other economic bodies. Based on that, I've come to the conclusion that true broadband can offer $200 million a year to the to the economy in Tasmania.
We acknowledge that there's pent-up investment in Tasmania in relation to broadband, we believe that we'll be able to achieve significant investments now and into the future.
All our business, most of our personal activity, will be done online. Our life will be online. We'll be shopping online, we'll be doing business online, health online, education online. So unless we keep up with what's happening around the world, we will become uncompetitive.
In that context, this week's step towards faster, cheaper broadband is a small but significant step.